Hi everybody, it's really great to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing the story with you because it's been more than 20 years in the making in bat conservation. So when Kate Richardson and I started Bats KZN back in '94, we realized that, and I'm going to focus on the bat side of the equation here, but we realized that bats suffered from really bad negative public perceptions, and that this was one of the main reasons or threats to bat conservation. All the associations with witchcraft and diseases and so forth that are highly exaggerated. So we realized really back then one of the important contributions we could make to bat conservation would be to promote the strong positive message about the role that bats play as ecosystem service providers, and most particularly in terms of in the control of agricultural pests. So way back in the day there was very little information or hard data about this. And we wanted to tell our own story. So we were telling the American story. We had this, from Bat Conservation International, we had this tape commentary that we all knew off by heart. And we would give dozens of public talks every single year and promote the importance of bats to agriculture. So the wow factor we had was this. It comes out of Texas, of course, where everything's bigger and better. But down in Texas in the Cotton Belt, there's these massive cave colonies of up to 20 million bats, Mexican free-tailed bats. And 100 million of these bats nightly, while we're all sleeping, those who don't work on bats, those 100 million bats come up and they move. You can see this on Doppler radar. They're like a weather swarm. They move into the agricultural areas. And they consume vast numbers of insects. I don't know if anybody would hazard a guess how many tons of insects can be consumed at night. Anybody hazard a guess? So the commentary told us the equivalent of 100 Asian elephants. I don't know why it had to be Asian elephants, but a couple of 100 tons of bats. And can you even imagine that kind of tons of insects, not bats, sorry. So people said you'd be knee-deep in insects if there weren't bats, and you can almost believe that. So we needed our own data to convince farmers and landowners about the importance of bats, because they were being persecuted, we were worried about agricultural intensification and pesticides. So now at last we can present you real data that we're really excited about. But to me, the most exciting part of the story is not the sexy science, but my second last slide, which I'll leave you in suspense about, but the response that we get from the farmers. So to realize this dream meant moving from KwaZulu-Natal, where I was 20 years in Durban, up to Limpopo, to the University of Vhembe, and working for 7 years, since 2010, with the macadamia industry, the South African Macadamia Association. There is a thing here, isn't there, somewhere? Yeah. The Macadamia Association, and particularly one of my co-authors, Dries, who is the guru of the macadamia world. And it took 4 years to convince him that bats even ate stink bugs. But once we got the nod from him, he's now one of our biggest allies. He's an economist working in the industry, consultant. We also were fortunate to work with a group from the University of Göttingen, agroecology group, and to get a lot of German funding. So I also want to just acknowledge the NRF and the Department of Science and Technology for my chair, which is co-hosted by the Center for Invasion Biology. All right, I've got to find a down key. All right. No, nothing's happening. That one. That's going too fast. So I'm going to be talking about bats as in pest control, but we should bear in mind that fruit bats are also incredibly important providers of ecosystem services, such as pollination and seed dispersal. So we wouldn't have baobab trees if we didn't have fruit bats. And just as importantly, we wouldn't have tequila if we didn't have bats, because the agave plants, flowers, are pollinated by Mexican nectar-feeding bats. Bats disperse a lot of seeds. It's been estimated about 95% of all the forests that regrow in West Africa come from seeds dropped by bats. So, all very important. But there's unprecedented threats that are having a big impact on bats in other parts of the world. In America, the white-nosed fungus, bushmeat trade is increasing massively in areas like Madagascar and parts of Africa, and the wind industry. So, very briefly, the white-nosed fungus, it's a fungus that grows in the skin in the nose of bats. It irritates them. Cave bats, it develops in cave bats. It was probably carried across to New York State from Europe on the boots of a caver in 2006. So the bats are irritated, they wake up and they starve. And this epidemic has just moved from east to west. It's almost reached the west coast of the United States. And by 2012, it had killed around 7 million bats. So just imagine not just the conservation disaster, but the disaster in terms of the impact on pest control. So from those experiments in Texas, there was a paper published in 2011 by Justin Boyles, which showed that it extrapolated these results over the entire farmlands of the United States. And a very minimum estimate of $20 billion are saved every year by bats, about $75 a hectare. That's what the value of bats is to agriculture. So you can see that that has a massive effect. Wind energy, we don't have time to go into it, but just in 1 year, 2012, 250,000 bats at least were estimated to have died. So you can see wind energy exploded in the United States, and we're down here somewhere, just in the beginning in South Africa. So, yeah, I won't dwell on that, but bats, of course, are incredibly beautiful, gentle, extraordinary creatures that have really adapted to their nocturnal niche. They're very diverse. The list is growing, but at least 1,300 species of bats. Just in Africa alone, we've added 45 species since the last 2 decades, some of which I've been guilty of. But what's more to the point today is that they are voracious consumers of night-flying insects, such as the stink bug, which is the great enemy of macadamia farmers. This photograph was taken very kindly by Merlin Tuttle, who founded Bat Conservation International. He's a world-famous National Geographic photographer who visited us for a few weeks and turned one of the rooms in my house into a studio. It took him 10,000 pictures to get this one and 100 stink bugs. So while no bats were harmed in the making of this movie, I'm afraid to say I can't say the same about the stink bugs. But a picture like this speaks 1,000 words and very useful for getting the confidence of the farming community, many of whom did not believe that bats ate stink bugs. This is a stink bug, that's a split-faced bat. So very briefly, in the next 10, 15 minutes, I want to touch on 2 approaches that can be used to economically value bat predation, and then to touch on a model that I want to present to you, avoided cost economic model, that we developed for bats and stink bugs in macadamia orchards. It's in press at the moment. And then present some preliminary data from a 2-year experiment where we excluded birds and bats in macadamia orchards. So a sort of a top-down approach to try to validate this model in terms of the value of bats. So yes, they do. Yes, they can. Generalist predators can initiate trophic cascades, like birds and bats. They can suppress agricultural pest insects and various groups of insects. This was a meta-analysis, a review done by Beer Maas, and I was in this group, reviewed in 2015, all the work ever done on exclusion studies, including birds and or bats in different systems, cacao, coffee, forests, and orchards. And these negative response ratios that you can see there, no, you can't, indicate suppression of different groups of insects by birds and bats in isolation or together. So arthropods, herbivores, and spiders, all suppressed by bats and birds. So yes, they can. That's one approach. You can also develop avoided cost models. And I'm just going to show one paper. A lot of the work was done in America, as I said. This was a paper done in Thailand, in rice paddies, where there also are very large colonies of this wrinkle-lipped bat. And we know how many white-backed planthoppers a wrinkle-lipped bat eats. We know that damage to rice are caused by white-backed planthoppers. We can do simple models. So bats in Thailand save rice farmers about $1.2 million. More importantly, this can be equated to 26,000 protected rice meals. So it's important for food security. And why does it not always work? Is it going? So we moved to macadamias. It's proved to be a good system to understand predation services of bats. It's a area of high bat diversity. And if you put up, it's been supported by those partners that you can see there. If you put up a harp trap like this in the orchards, these are the kind of bats you would catch. I didn't believe we would catch bats with harp traps in orchards because you normally have to place them in flyways and forests and so on. And when you've got these thousands of hectares of macadamias, well, the bats are flying around And this farm, we recorded about 23 species from acoustic bat detectors. So we're living in an area of very high diversity where these experiments and this work takes place, where I'm very fortunate to live. The Vhembe Biosphere Reserve, which is centered on the Soutpansberg Mountains, which everybody knows is a recognized hotspot of plant endemism and plant and animal diversity. I'm sorry, Tim, but we have more plant genera than the fynbos. 1,000 plant genera, more than 500 plants, that's tree species. So it's a wonderful area to work. And Mapungubwe in the top left, top end of Kruger in the right. And this is the area where macadamia are grown commercially in Levubu. So every day I drive, when I'm not traveling, I drive from Lutricot to Tuando. It's a 140-kilometer round trip. And I've seen some massive changes in the last 3 or 4 years. Some of you might know there's a macadamia rush on. And everybody is just converting their land to macadamias. The world price is ridiculously high. The Chinese market is increasing hugely. So it's also a bat hotspot. So the same area that I'm working in is the area of highest richness of bats in the country. And yes, they do. They do eat stink bugs. This was a study presented, first of all, in an academic industry journal based on next generation sequencing of pellets taken from 6 species of bats. These were bats that we expect to eat stink bugs because they are clutter feeders, they fly slowly, and they can glean insects like the slit-faced bats. But there are also bats that are high-flying bats, like the swallows of the bat world, that the books say will not be able to glean or reach insects that fly slowly and mostly spend their time on branches like stink bugs. But to our surprise, we found all these species, well, 5 of these 6 species of all different foraging groups, contained DNA of the green vegetable stink bug, which is one of the pest species. A third of all the pellets contained stink bugs DNA, and another third contained unidentified bugs, which I'd put my head on the block as the other main culprit, the twin spot stink bug, which didn't have any barcode sequence data available back then. So this sort of turned the tide for the farmers, that they could see, yes, bats do eat stink bugs, but more importantly, we showed a video. At the same time, in June 2013, I presented this at the annual symposium, Macadamia Symposium, and Dries was there, sitting in the back, and then after this, I showed a video. If we have time for questions at the end, I'll show it in the background. That showed a bat eating stink bugs like there was no tomorrow. And afterwards, there was silence, and the hands went up and said, show us that video again. So I got the nod from Dries, and the chairman of Subtrop came after the talk and said, how much do you want? How much money do you want for this? So that was a turning point for us. And of course, now the farmers are very much on board, that we use their equipment to help build these exclusion cages. We put up our bat houses, and they come and pack their farm sheds. When we have our batty ambassador, that's Myrna Tuttle, who took the photographs. So we've had huge support. There's a lot known about stink bugs. 5 minutes, thank you. All right, we can do this. So we know that the annual peak coincides, that's really what we want to show you on that slide, with the nut growth and harvest time of the year. So we also have 5 years of data on peaks in different species of stink bugs. The blue one is the twin spot, which is the main species. So we know a lot about stink bugs. These are the macadamia growing areas of South Africa, 21,000 hectares every year. Another 1,000 hectares are planted. And the fastest growing area is in KwaZulu-Natal, where sugarcane is being converted to macadamia at quite a rate. So we know all the parameters now that we need for this model. We know all the economics. We know about the pest demography crop and their injury coefficients. We know about the bat consumption rates and all of that stuff. We had a lucky break to be able to estimate bat densities, so I'll come to that. So this is this spreadsheet calculator that Dries Alberts designed for the farmers. This is all the economic data. So farmers plug this in. What's the yields expected? This was 2015. The cost of macadamia, so a nut is 20 cents. So a farmer can make from a hectare 73,000 rand. That's why they're turning everything to macadamias. Then along come the bad guys. They have to scout every week. It's a weekly thing. You scout the number of trees, how many stink bugs there are. And if you count 10 stink bugs on 10 trees, they're going to damage 5 nuts. So it's going to cost you 312 rand, whereas spraying will cost you 900 rand. So according to this threshold method, you would spray after 3 weeks. But a lot of farmers use calendar spraying. They just spray the hell out of these things anyway, and they don't use any sort of estimation. So to save time, just believe me, this is all true about stink bugs. A lot is known about them, their fertility, survival, longevity that goes into the model. And we also know about bats. The value that's usually used in models for nightly insect consumption is around 39 to 74%. We also use a lower estimate. And we know from many student studies what proportion of their diet is hemiptera and what proportion of hemiptera are these stink bugs. There's the model. So now at last we have some idea about the value of bats. And this dotted line shows the current level of damage caused by stink bugs. And you can see I've just put a range of estimates there from 1 to 46 bats a hectare, depending on how many bats there are and whether your consumption rate, you use high or low values. You can see it would take about 26 bats a hectare before, at the high consumption rate, before you reach the current level of damage. This means, thank you, that if you had no bats, you would have double the damage. So could we estimate bat densities? Yes. Thankfully, this was a picture of King Shaka Airport site before they built King Shaka. I was part of the EIA. Because they had to monitor the barn swallows, several hundred barn swallows there in the approach of the airplane, we got to use Merlin anti-aircraft avian avoidance radar. I don't have time to show you the video, but believe me, the night skies are packed. These videos show they're packed with bats. And so at different altitudes, you can see the different number of biological targets or bats. And so we had a number in the 1 nautical mile radius of bats for over 3 nights, and so about 15 bats a hectare is a value we can plug into this model, put 50% on either side, so we get sort of national figures now. These are very conservative, I should say. But you can say basically that the yield saved by bats, South African macadamia farmers, is about 600 tons a year, which is about 1.3% of production, and so the avoided costs of bats it amounts to about a quarter of the actual levels of current stink bug damage, which is 200 million rand a year. So I did a little review to compare our studies with others using the 2 approaches and looking at it in terms of percentage production or dollars per hectare. And I'm not going to have time to go into that. I have a minute left. So these are the exclusion experiments that we've been doing to validate these results. We built cages over 2 trees and 48 of these cages. And we've been doing it for 2 years now. These are our treatments, 6 orchards, and we have where good edges are experiments near macadamia, near natural vegetation, bad edges are on the edge of monocultures. And so we have to open and close half those cages every day. Farm workers did that for 2 years, every morning, every night. So some were closed at night to exclude bats. Others were closed in the day and opened at night to exclude birds. So 2 PhD students did all the monthly sampling of insects and bats, and crack the nuts. So you take the husk off and you can measure the moth damage from the blemishes. You crack the nuts, and from the kernel you can work out the stink bug damage. And this is almost my last slide, but this just shows you the results from 1 year. That's nut damage, percentage unsound kernel due to stink bug damage, and the control is about 17% unsound kernel. And then when we have days only or nights only exclusion, or both, you can see it increases from 17% to 20, 22%. So the bottom line is that, yes, the bats and the birds play a very important role. This result was repeated in the second year. I don't have time to show you the recent data I saw last week, and the moth damage shows the same effect. So control has much less damage than when we exclude either birds or bats. So it's a story for another day, but this is the goosebump talk slide, my last slide. And this is the response. The farmers were so excited about this. The local farmers, that the main macadamia producer in the country wrote a press release, and this just went to all the farmer magazines. I think about 11 or 12 now, Farmers Weekly, and all with a positive message. Millions of saving possible in the macadamia industry. It's bats control pests. That was our local Sitbansburg newspaper, and this was the Afrikaans press as well. So basically, avoided cost models show that there's a significant positive impact of stink bugs, and these exclusion experiments are validating this, and they're important, very important demonstration project in the Biosphere Reserve, Vhembe Biosphere Reserve. So the really nice thing is how farmers have endorsed and disseminated these results, and hopefully it will result in more sustainable practices, and we will continue the study in the long term to try to upscale these in a wider area. So thanks. I don't know, I think I've probably used most of my time.